President Muhammadu Buhari yesterday presented a 2022 budget estimate to a joint session of the National Assembly. The proposed total expenditure for the coming year is put at 16.39 trillion naira, with crude oil benchmark price of $57 per barrel and daily oil production estimate of at least 1.88 million barrels per day. That's inclusive of condensate of 300,000 to about 400,000 barrels per day, with exchange rate projected at 410 naira 15 kobo per dollar and projected GDP growth rate of 4.2% with 13% as the inflation rate for the year 2022. The proposed budget, which is also titled Budget of Economic Growth and Sustainability, is also the first in Nigeria's history where ministries, departments and agencies are clearly advised on gender-responsive budgeting. Worthy of note is also that fiscal operations of the federal government is expected to be in a deficit of at least 6.26 trillion naira, representing a 3.39% of the estimated GDP, slightly above the 3% threshold set by the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2007. And now, to make more sense of the breakdown of the 2022 budget proposal, I have in our Lagos studio Senior Economist at SPM Professionals, Paul Alaje. Good to have you on the show this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Now, let's start off with efforts at consolidating the January to December budgetary cycle. And then we're also seeing, as the President mentioned just yesterday, we're also going to see the Finance Bill 2022 also come along with that. Consultations are ongoing and expected to be fully completed before the year runs out, and also the scrutiny of the budget. How do you think this gives validation to this effort of maintaining a January to December cycle, and also what sort of implementation index do we use to now measure not just necessarily having the months being filled up going by the chronological order, but giving it meaning, really?
So first thing is we've continued to see consistency in terms of budget submission, which of course come after MTF have been submitted and approved by the joint section of National Assembly. Budget presentation comes on board, and we have seen that the President and his team have remained consistent in ensuring that we have January to December budget passage, which have now become to a large extent what we can plan with. And for that to work, we have also seen that government consistently make necessary adjustment to Finance Act. This is not the first time a budget to be accompanying that, and we have seen much of what we could do in 2021 and now 2022. So for me, I think it's so very significant that we have the two documents go side by side. If not, once National Assembly approves the amendments to the Finance Act as for review, then we can also have budget, and all of this can happen in the space of short period of time, because MTF already has given some level of view, insight, I beg your pardon, into what the budget summary will look like.
Okay, now let's also look at some of the highlights of the presentation the President made just yesterday. We're also looking at, in the medium term, a target of revenue to GDP growth of at least from the current 8% to 15%. Whether or not this is a little bit too optimistic is a question for another day, but we now see the issue of debt taking center stage. We have a deficit of no less than about 6.39 thereabout. And then we are looking at the model. We're still approaching a recurrent expenditure 6.83, and then capital project at 5.35 trillion naira. The President, in his words, insists that's the body language of government over the course of these few years, this administration, saying that we don't have a debt problem. All we just have to deal with right now is just revenue generation issues, concerns within this regard. If you can't generate as much, then it translates to you being heavily laden by debt. But why does the government have a different body language to debt, really, as it is?
Well, I think because government is not generating sufficiently, then debt becomes the only option available. So if you don't want to continue borrowing, we have to become more innovative
and independent.
So then now there are rules actually beyond what we think is right. Economics have rules before you advise to keep borrowing or stop borrowing. What Nigerian authorities have done over the years is to compare us with the remaining of other countries. But you know, the comparison is not balanced, and it's important for us to balance it so that we don't have challenges in the coming period. First, Before you borrow, you have to look at what debt to GDP says. Now, for Nigeria, it's less than 40%, which means it's still allowable. But mark you, that is just the first condition. You need minimum of 2 conditions, traditional economics. The second one says, what is your debt service to revenue? We have to be around 1/3 of our revenue so that we can have funds to do infrastructure and so on and so forth. So that debt service will not take a loss from government revenue. Our report shows that we did between 50 to 90%, that much, for the year just concluded, or the year that we are still seeing. If you are doing that much, should you continue to borrow when you are doing more than ×2 of what should be the benchmark? Already that tells us we should not continue to borrow. But that is not even the most important. The most important thing is the impact of debt on our economy. Now, when you look at average of how we had borrowed in the last 5 years, is about an average of 20% per annum. But when you look at average economic growth rate per annum, is less than 2%. So should we then continue to borrow? Because that also says no. Now, look at another thing. When you consider what exchange rate has been, around February, Nigeria devalued from 390 to 410 naira thereabout at official window. Debt Management Office report showed that we added 1 trillion naira to our debt profile for borrowing no money. Why? Because we are faced with exchange rate risk. So all the monies we borrowed that are foreign loans, automatically we be affected by the devaluation. So when we devalue and people bring argument, let's just devalue naira once and for all, I kept saying they don't mean well for Nigeria because they have not considered all the factors. 1 trillion naira, that's more than if you remove Lagos and perhaps one other state, 2 other states from Southwest. 3 remaining states, the budget they are presenting is not up to 1 trillion naira. So that we had it because of one single policy to debt profile, and we have to pay back. Where are we going to get the money from? And if you check, year in, year out, the value that we borrow to finance our budget have continued to increase, which means our real challenge, as President said, is revenue. But this problem now has monster that could create for our economy. Guess what that is? Debt crisis. So if you say you want to wait till the day you are able to solve revenue challenges, by solving revenue challenges, you're already solving debt challenges. So what should we do? Government need to reconsider and see what the opportunities are by generating revenue where we can today. And I'd
like to butt in here now where we can generate revenue from. The government has not necessarily looked at very unique, innovative strategies for revenue generation. So for some analysts, they just feel that for revenue generating agencies now, it's just to slap on add additions to the targets. That's just the body language that is being mimicked at this point in time. But if we have an expected revenue generation rate of about 10.13 trillion naira for next year, that's the peg, and then we are not necessarily prepared for any shock, do you think we can really meet up with sustaining our budgets without having the conversation of extra debt? We're not positioning our revenue generation agencies properly, much more robustly. We have issues around tax as well. Yes, we are getting to the point where we are having fine linings within our tax system, but our tax administration, the net is still small. So how then do we now have cushions in a situation of revenue generation challenges?
Now, I can understand when people say our tax administration are very limited, and because of that, it will be unfair to be looking at debt to GDP alone. We also need to look at revenue to GDP. So when we say we want to borrow only debt to GDP, then we'll be making a lot of mistakes. Now, when you look at countries of our size in different continents, China has the largest population in Asia. It's Germany for Europe. It's America, United States for North America. Those countries have huge debt, but revenue to GDP is also as strong. That is what we lack here. So when we say that we should ask tax authority to collect more money from people, it will come with some challenges or some form of inconvenience, and I will tell you why. Report shows that about 7 million people last year were added to the poverty, below the poverty bracket. What does that mean? About 50% of Nigerian population are struggling with poverty and hunger. Mark you, those are people that are living below. We have people that are poor. We have people that are living barely above poverty line. UNDP report 2018 showed that over 80 million Nigeria are living under multidimensional poverty, not just one class of poverty, but multidimensional poverty. When you look at all of this, what best can Revenue Authority do? For me, government of the day, including executive and legislature, first need to block leakages. That can add approximately 1 trillion naira to the money we are looking for. That would have borrowed about 6 trillion. That on one side. Subsidy cost us about 1 trillion naira per annum. Now, if you put palliatives in place and you remove subsidy, you have put 2 trillion naira as safety, so you will not need to borrow. Thirdly, we have put oil benchmark at about 57 when we sold about 80-81. That could be moved up a bit to about 60. You save near 1 trillion, again about 844 billion naira. And if you adjust the exchange rate to show the reality that central bank put on the website, you are supposed to be talking about another 1 trillion. So you have halved what you want to borrow. You know, you have reduced this significantly. The benchmark based on the fiscal fiscal act that we had, that we are now above 3%, that will go back even below 3%, about 2.something%, and we'll say we are now at a comfortable level because we can generate revenue. All of these things will just come with policies from government. You don't need to do so much effort, but the projections will now be looking right. Now, what do I think government should do physically, apart from saving about 3 trillion naira, which I think we can save from this budget? Now, the first thing government should do is to look at the report shared by National Bureau of Statistics. Most of the answers we are looking for, they're in the numbers. Agencies of government, different agencies of government have published figures. One of the figures shows that there are sectors that are growing, even though Nigeria and other countries are ravaged by the pandemic. But there are sectors that are growing, which include telecom, which include banking, etc., etc. The question authorities should ask is, why are we not making as such from this sector? You know, it is not to chase small business owners and so on and so forth. And that's why I love one of the amendments made recently to Finance Act to exempt some small business people so that they can keep getting people to work, but the organization can exist because of tax burden. Because if the burden of taxes is high for an economy that is struggling, I'm afraid it might even have negative effect. It may be counterproductive to what authorities want to achieve this moment today. So quite a number of things authorities can do. Do a sectorial analysis as to where are the monies. Maritime, how much are we generating from the entire sector? Because I strongly believe that definitely more could be done apart from telecom, maritime, and quite a number of other sectors that government can generate more revenue that could be up to 2 to 3 trillion, because I strongly believe we have no business borrowing this moment today.
Government is also looking at part of its plans now to strengthen framework for concessions and also public-private partnerships. So that reduces the level of burden, and also the private sector comes with their invigorating power on how to strategize. And we're also exploring, looking at exploration of opportunities in the ecosystem for green financing, sovereign green bonds, and a whole lot more. This tilts towards thinking outside the box. But do you think we'll be able to implement such programs aside from the policy in paper? On paper?
Well, because we're already doing a few things.
More robustly?
Yes, for Eurobond, we're already getting some of them, but we should also know that Eurobond itself is a debt. We are still borrowing. So I am saying beyond the debt, public-private partnership is fantastic, but the energy and support for government to see that through, needs to be invigorated. And how do I mean? We have seen quite a number of, we've seen an agency of government set up maintenance of road construction and so on and so forth under sovereign wealth. We have seen that new energy, but we need to see it through. We need to make private sector see reasons to invest. When you ask private sector to support government only on where they will invest and they cannot see returns in naira and kobo, it's going to be very tough. You don't say just construct road and we hope that you use tax credit to pay back. You will not see the number. Yes, a few persons will join, but when you say that construct major federal road and maintain, then such road could be told, provided we are giving alternative for those who cannot afford it to use, then that makes sense globally. But if we say that people must pay, that's where we may have the challenge. So if you have such roads and you bring in private sector to construct and to maintain, we have an example in Lagos already, to construct, to maintain and give alternative to people, most of our road will be better. And once you have access You know, in form of road, rail, and energy. I'm talking of power, either gas in your vehicle, or you have energy that you use to power your homes or your business, or in form of electricity. What you are going to see is economic activity will be invigorated.
Well, the government prides itself in that we've seen a heavy investment in infrastructure. Most recently, we've seen a whole lot of rail projects, improvement in road projects, and much more. Paul, the government insists that these are what the funds that are being borrowed are used for. But the other question is this still enough? Others are also saying, well, we should remove the subsidy on petrol and have subsidy on other issues such as education, health. We have to look at much more investment, promotion, and also having incentives in the real sectors of the economy then to support our infrastructure development and much more. But at a point in time where we are having high double-digit inflation rates, the naira is recording a free fall, so to speak. How would you say this 4.2% that the federal government sees the GDP growing by next year as a mirage or not?
See, the foundation is faulty, and it's been faulty for a long time. The focus of our economy is primary, and when you talk of primary production level, it's an economy that is driven by nature. If the crude oil in Nigeria dries up, we're stranded. If rain refuses to fall, rain says it just has a mind of its own, it's not going to fall on our farms, we are stranded. If bandits impede people from going to farms, and farms is soil, because we see practice traditional method of farming, we are stranded. So there is no activity that has transformed us from primary level of production to secondary, and that's where the jobs are. That's where the monies are. That's where all the dreams, aspirations, that's where they are. You know why? China showed me so. China, largest population in the world, we don't talk about Chinese farm, we talk about Chinese production. Germany, the largest in Europe, we don't talk about German farm. What do we talk about? German machine. For Americas, we talk about American power, which is evident in production. You know, name the country that has the largest in its continent. We talk about production. For Nigeria, what is the place of producer? The suit we put on today, are they made in Nigeria? Those that are watching us on their televisions or YouTube, the device, either phone or television they are using to watch us, are they made in Nigeria? Women that are watching us today, the air, even though they are women, they still bought woman air. The air they buy, is it made in Nigeria or is imported? It's so bad that people impregnate their wives, export their wives, then import their children and give the name to Kumbo. It is that bad until we are able to produce locally. Significant amount of production. I'm not saying we should produce everything we need, but when we take time to study National Bureau of Statistics, we'll start seeing what we import the most. Do we have comparative cost advantage over those areas, or can we deliberately build strength in those areas, then provide infrastructure around all of those? Then Nigeria will start growing consistently. If not, you will see 7% GDP, but to be jobless. You will see 5% GDP, but unemployment will be going up. Inflation will be increasing at a reducing rate, but the impact will not be felt. Why? Because the foundation of economic growth and development is faulty. No nation that we get there will focus on growth alone, but what we need to focus on more to bring economic prosperity to us is called economic development. That means we need to substitute at double digits with substance, not just with primary. Primary is not wrong, like crude oil, but we need to start refining locally. For refineries that we have been turning, but remember last year refused to move, we need either we privatize them or we jumpstart them so that we can reduce our import bill on PMS. That is why even when government, you notice government said sometimes about 3-4 years ago, they partially removed subsidy. Why is subsidy back? Because the exchange rates, we bring dollar into the mix. When the exchange rate gets worse, exchange rate was about 306. Today is about 400 and something. Government say have to pay. So subsidy will come back. And the government say let force of demand and supply declare price, and we devalue our naira, automatically it goes back to pump price. So what do we need to do? How do we produce locally? And that will guarantee power, that will guarantee infrastructure. Until our GDP component, manufacturing takes almost 20%, agriculture is taking. I'm afraid we'll still continue to have a number of issues to deal with.
Now, in the next 2 minutes, we have to wrap up our conversation. What do you make of our Forex policy at this point in time? What sort of shift do you also expect from the body language of government? We have a peg of 410 naira 15 kobo to the dollar as part of the proposals for 2020. We've seen some of the initiatives the Central Bank of Nigeria has taken, and whether or not this has heightened the vulnerability of the naira, that's another question we have to deal with. What sort of shift in the body language of government and then the CBN, our monetary fiscal authorities, do you expect to ensure that we have a much more resilient naira?
Okay, so I will talk in terms of short-term policy. I think central bank should do is to increase supply. Supply is still very low.
That's difficult.
When you say that is difficult, you are saying that vis-a-vis what we have in our foreign reserve. You are looking at it like that. I am saying that we need to increase supply for us to even crash unnecessary demand that is sending signal and pointer to the parallel markets. So that on one side. On the second side, most of the foreign loans, and this is one good thing we have to talk about when foreign loan comes, they all go first to our reserve. So when they get to our reserve, it gives confidence that we now have enough foreign currency that a central bank can come to defend like a buffer. So that is a short/medium term. But what is the long term? The long term lies with National Bureau of Statistics report. You cannot continue to export 90% of what guarantees, not 90%, 90% of our export is from crude oil and gas. After that, agriculture, seasonal seed. What else do we export to give us? Oil and gas, 90%. And these are not my figures. National Bureau of Statistics says so. And when we export, we will now go back and import it. Already we have created crisis for ourselves. It is not just because of what we bought. Again, leave that. Our people are in school. Most of the school uniform, where did they come from? Imported. And we keep giving birth at almost 3%. Population growth rates. And some of them that are in school, I'm not even talking of over 10 million that are out of school. I'm talking of those that are in school, 40 million pupils per time. A lot of issues. So we need to do production, and this will promote two policies: import substitution, export promotion, so that we can conserve enough. That is why China has huge, because it promotes exports. So until we start promoting such that we will not need to deplete the limited amount, that's when we can be talking of significant and sustainable GDP growth.
Thank you very much for your time on the show today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Paul Alaje, and hopefully in the scrutiny of this budget proposal that we have by the National Assembly, some of these issues will be highlighted, and then we have to give meaning to all of these figures in real naira and kobo terms. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for having me.